Chapter 13. Baby's Problem. Baby watched Ida disappear into the town hall. Did you see that? She was with a Blackshirt again! Fingers jabbed her finger on every word. Why are you even still bothering with her? She don't want our help, and she ain't helping her sister. Fingers had whipped up her own little storm cloud. Perhaps she was right. Maybe they shouldn't be getting distracted by uppity purse girl Ida and her sister. They were no closer to finding Sophie, the whole reason for being in Nettlefield in the first place. Baby sighed. It's certainly a problem, was all she could say, without letting on how awful she felt. Awful that it was her falling off that lamppost that had got Sophie caught in the first place. Awful that coming to Netterfield had made her so confused about scarpering off to America. And awful is to America without her, or worse, to hell with that devil Underwood. Baby needed to think. Chapter 14. Miss Lovelock. The little metal Blakeys on Ida's heels clicked louder and even more echoingly on the marble tiles. She squinted at the signs on the walls and willed the letters to stay still until she made out children with an arrow pointing to a grand staircase sweeping up to the floor above. She grabbed the polished wooden banister and climbed up on tiptoes. At the top, a youngish woman walked out of the door, clutching a thick bundle of papers. It was the awkward-looking woman who'd been on the back seat with Bonnie when Mrs. Buller took her away. Why, it's Ida, isn't it? The awkwardness had gone, and the young woman's face was warm and kind. Her short, fashionable hair bounced round her smile. She looked quite smart, but her cardigan had a neat darn at the elbow. How did you get up here? asked the woman. Not unkindly. Ida explained about the rumpus going on outside and how everyone in the whole town seemed to have abandoned their posts to march or shout at the marchers. You must have heard it. The woman studied the wad of paper in her arms. Sometimes I don't hear anything when I'm busy at the typewriter. I'm Miss Lovelock. I'm Mr. Wimpole's secretary. You were there yesterday when they took my sister. Her name's Bonnie Barnes. I've come to ask for her back. In 2 days I'll be 14 and I'll be old enough to look after her. It was what our mother wanted. Miss Lovelock held the papers even closer to her chest and lowered her voice. I'm sorry. I really am. She looked round furtively, then continued in a whisper. I hate that part of my job, but I'm not sure what I can do. I can't risk getting the sack, though I often think I should be braver and damn the consequences. I know these people say they don't want war, but it doesn't feel right to me. Have you heard some of the things they say about Jewish people? No, of course you haven't. You're too young. Oh, I shouldn't go on, but it's in my head the whole time. Miss Lovelock was not at all how Ida remembered her. I brought all these forms, but I need help to fill them in. Will they make a difference? Ida waved her own bundle of papers. Ida recognised the weaselly whine of Mr. Wimpole from downstairs. Whatever you say, madam, I know you have the best interests of the children at heart. Shall we discuss this further in my office? Most kind, Mr. Wimpole, most kind, replied Mrs. Buller in her sour cream voice. Mrs. Buller, you really are doing a marvellous job rehoming these children, and I agree. I think channeling the county's orphans through you is a very cost-effective idea. Shoes clicked on the stone stairs, and Ida's shoulders prickled with the anger she felt for the woman. Miss Lovelock grabbed Ida's hand. Let's see what we can do. Come in here. Miss Lovelock opened the door behind them. The room was hardly bigger than a cupboard. In fact, it was a cupboard. Brown cardboard boxes balanced 4 or 5 high along the walls. Sit on my seat. I'll find something else to sit on. Miss Lovelock pointed to a desk positioned skew-whiff under a tiny window at the far end, with a full tray of paper marked "In." It was 10 times Ida's and her own bundles put together. Ida slid between the wall and the desk and settled herself on Miss Lovelock's wobbly chair. There was another crinkly pile of paperwork on the desk. As Miss Lovelock was trying to get comfy on an upside-down box on the other side, Ida read, J.P. Doswell and Sons, Nettlefield Superior Department Store. And underneath, a list of items with prices. Oh, the orphanage paperwork comes to me. Miss Lovelock snatched the papers off the desk, and her cheeks glowed a little pinker. Shall we take a look at your paperwork? Ida handed over her own little bundle, now rolled into a paper truncheon. Mr. Wimpole's wheezly voice came from the corridor. Where is that woman? It demanded. Miss Lovelock sat up, back straight and stiff at the sound of the annoyed person outside. Her job is hanging by a thread, Mrs. Buller. Hanging by a thread, said Mr. Wimpole. That's my boss, and he means me, said Miss Lovelock. Stay here while I see what he wants. With the orders for Doswells that were on the desk, she slipped out and closed the door behind her with a soft click. Ida put her ear to the door. I have those papers you wanted. Miss Lovelock's voice trembled and faded away down the corridor with more than one pair of clicky heels on the tiled floor. Ida opened the door a little way and crept on her tiptoes in the same direction as the footsteps. She hadn't gone far when another, bigger and much more important-looking door opened. With a salmon-pink scarf round her neck and her lips the brightest red, Mrs. Buller, along with Mr. Wimpole and Miss Lovelock, emerged in much the same deputation as the one that had taken Bonnie yesterday. They marched along the corridor towards Ida. What are you doing here, child? Demanded Mr. Wimpole. Ida stretched to her full height. I've come to tell you that you've taken my sister into the orphanage by mistake and that I'm old enough to be her legal guardian. Mr. Wimpole thumbed through another bundle of paper. I don't think so, young lady. You are only 13 years old. Didn't my uncle telephone you, though? I'm 14 on Saturday. Ida could feel her temper taking over. The only telephone calls the council has received today have been concerning the march, he said. So Uncle Arthur hadn't telephoned the council. Of course, he wanted to care for Bonnie, so why would he help her? But Ida couldn't understand why he'd let Bonnie go to the orphanage with that horrible woman. I'm sure the training school will be sending for you in the not-too-distant future. Mrs. Buller sidled closer to Mr. Wimpole and pushed her arm through his. Now, would you like to walk me to my car, Stanley? It would be a pleasure, Hilda. Get that child out of here, Miss Lovelock. Miss Lovelock stood alone in the corridor, overloaded with yet another pile of paper. Yes, Mr. Wimpole. Can I take her with me on an early lunch? On an early lunch break. I did start at 7 this morning. At this precise moment, I don't care where you take her as long as it's out of here. Mr. Wimpole sauntered towards the stairs, locked arm in arm with Mrs. Buller. Wait there a mo, Ida, I'll get my jacket, said Miss Lovelock, and a moment later, in a little patched at the elbows tweed jacket, she closed her cupboard office door. She wrapped a woolly scarf round her neck and pulled her hat low over her forehead as she tiptoed with Ida down the sweeping staircase in Mrs. Buller's wake. What about the paperwork for my sister? I'll deal with that when I get back. It's on the top of the pile. But which one? She had so many. Ida was going to have to find another way. I'll get to them first and see what I can do, Miss Lovelock said unconvincingly, ushering her out of the town hall's huge front door. Harry was still on the steps, leaning against one of the columns, wrapped up in his blue coat. His teeth chattered in the cold. Any success with your sister? he asked. No, not yet, but Miss Lovelock is helping me. Harry bowed politely to Miss Lovelock. Pleased to meet you. Yes, pleased to meet you, she replied stiffly. Did she catch a glimpse of his black shirt underneath his coat? Miller, where have you been? We're regrouping in the church hall. Hurry up, man. An older man with a large moustache and an expensive-looking coat with a fur collar pointed towards the church with his stick. She couldn't see the colour of his shirt, but Ida guessed it was black. Harry stood up and with the slightest shrug of his shoulders looked at Ida like a dog that was trying so hard to tell you something important, but being a dog had no words to express it. Ida wanted to believe that what he'd said earlier about being in the wrong group was true. She watched him go into the church hall next door to Underwood's. The aristocratic man ignored the disapproving looks of the shoppers as he picked his way across the street littered with rubble and rotting veg. I'll take you back to my lodgings, said Miss Lovelock. There'll be some soup in a pot, and I'll find you something. I'll find you something to keep you warm. It's not far. Ida only managed a few slurps of soup before Miss Lovelock's horrible landlady came home and snatched it away. So past the shopkeepers sweeping up outside their premises and wrapped in a shawl that once belonged to Miss Lovelock's mum, Ida ran for home. At number 7 Camellia Lane, the backyard gate swung on its hinges. Had Ida come out in such a hurry that she'd forgotten to close it? She couldn't remember. But when she peeped round the tin bath hung on the yard wall, she saw that the back door was open too. Burly workmen's voices shouted to one another inside. Got it, George? This one's a devil to get down the stairs. Too right, Ernie. God knows how they got it up here in the first place. And in the kitchen, a man with a clipboard was ticking things off a sheet.